Well, over the last few weeks, we've been looking at disruptions and thinking about what do we do when our life gets interrupted? And where in the world is God in all of it? Of course, we've always had disruptions, but these days it feels like that there are more disruptions than there is normalcy and any sort of routine in our lives. And the disruptions keep coming. We don't know when they're going to stop. Sometimes, of course, disruptions come to you, kind of like this season of coronavirus. You had nothing to do with it, but it came. Your life was disrupted. You were changed. But today, I want us to think together about a very different kind of disruption. In the scripture I'm about to read, Peter and the disciples, they were having this disruptive moment. There was this incredible storm when they were on the Sea of Galilee. But that's not the disruption we're going to focus on. Sometimes God invites you to take a risk. And that risk itself is the disruption. That disruption is really an invitation to do something that's out of your comfort zone. It's an invitation to be a part of something that doesn't really seem to add up. It doesn't really make human sense. Jesus wants you to be a part of something bigger. Jesus wants to work in your life to make your faith grow deeper. Here it is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Peter and the rest of the disciples were in the middle of the sea. The wind was blowing. The water was beating up against their boat. And I'm guessing even at 3 a.m. when this happened, they were not sleeping. And Jesus shows up. Jesus always shows up in the middle of the storm. We've been talking all about this for the last couple of weeks. Jesus promises that we will have troubles, we will have disruptions, but he also promises that he'll be with us. In the middle of the storm, these disciples who'd been with Jesus every hour of every day for months, these disciples don't recognize Jesus. There was too much going on around them. They're tired and they're scared and it's late. So this ghost that comes into their view makes things worse. I love how Jesus speaks to them. He doesn't let them freak out long. And he speaks to them, and better translated from the Greek, he says, take heart. I am. I love that phrase, I am. It's so familiar. It brings up a memory of Exodus where God introduces himself to Moses at the burning bush. Jesus doesn't just say, I'm coming, I'm almost there, or I can save you. No, he says, I am. I am. I have always been, and I always will be with you. In the middle of the storm, Jesus wants them to know. He wants them to know who he is, not just what he can do. I mean, he's so much more than they can even imagine. See, he can get them out of this mess they're in. But even more than that, Jesus is telling them and he's showing them that he is God. He can do everything they need, but he is everything they need. And they don't need to be afraid. No matter what storms they face, Jesus will be with them. You know, they're still learning this about Jesus, even though they've seen it time and time again, and they've had a front row seat to Jesus' ministry. They're still learning that Jesus will be with them, and maybe you're still learning that too. But then comes this other disruption, this invitation to Peter. See, once Peter knows it's Jesus, he wants in. It's actually a bit of surprise that Peter doesn't pull his usual ready, fire, aim. He doesn't jump in the water, but he asks Jesus. And Jesus says, come. You know, I love an adventure. Ask Mark. Adventure is really my love language, but sometimes I take that first step and then I hesitate. Like the time I did zip lines in Costa Rica, I did the first couple, no problem. Do you want to do the advanced line? Sure, I said. But oh my goodness, I couldn't look down. What had I gotten myself into? I had no choice but to keep going. I wonder if Peter flinched when Jesus told him to come out onto the wire. I love what John Ortberg says about this text. He says, put yourself in Peter's place for a moment. You have a sudden insight into what Jesus is doing. The Lord is passing by. He's inviting you to go on the adventure of your life, but at the same time, you're scared to death. What would you choose? The water or the boat? Someone said that faith can be spelled R-I-S-K. And Peter teaches us a lot about taking risks as followers of Jesus. And you might need to hear this today. First, taking risks, it can get you wet. When you take a risk, the stakes are so high. I mean, good stuff can happen, but so can bad stuff. And when you take that step, you might get wet. You know, so many times when we get invited to do something risky, conditions are less than perfect. For Peter, the risk came in the middle of the storm. It was terrible. The Greek says that the winds were tormenting the boat. You don't just take risks, though, when it's sunny or when the timing is right. See, if Peter was going to take that step, he was going to get wet no matter what. But he steps out anyway. Peter steps away from safety and he steps into the storm. He obeys. And he takes this huge step, this Indiana Jones, no bridge kind of moment. When Jesus gives him the green light, he leaps over the side of the boat and he walks for about 2 seconds. And then he takes his eyes off Jesus and he sinks like the rock his nickname is. And then he really gets wet. Taking risks got him wet, but Peter didn't fail. He took 3 whole steps. And Jesus didn't wait around to see if Peter could swim. Jesus immediately reaches out his hand, and it says that, I love this, Jesus caught Peter. Isn't that a great image? Like the dad who scoops up his son who's just learning to swim and can't quite get to the edge of the pool. Jesus scoops up Peter so fast. Peter takes a step and then he slips. He takes his eyes off of Jesus and puts them on the wind and the waves, and he sinks. Can't you relate? When you take a risk and you get out of the boat, you might get wet. But Jesus will be there. He'll be there to scoop you up. See, where Jesus guides, he will always provide. And when he scoops you up, he'll keep leading you and he'll keep growing you up in your faith. Maybe you're thinking as you hear that story and you think about Peter's experience that you'd rather not get wet. It can be so easy to simply stay in the boat and to miss out on what God has for you. See, you were wired to get out of the boat. See, taking risks also gives you the life you've always wanted. You were made to be a participant and not an observer. You were made to be in the game, not on the sidelines. Jesus said it this way. He said, I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. There will be opportunities for you in your life that God puts there right in front of you so you can live this full life. Maybe you know the story of John Wimber. He's the founder of the Vineyard Movement, and he has an amazing testimony. He was this professional musician who played the Las Vegas circuit for 5 years, and he had already been signed with the Righteous Brothers. But when John met Jesus, he describes himself as a beer-guzzling, drug-abusing pop musician who was chain-smoking his way through a Bible study. That John Wimber, he met Jesus, and he started reading his Bible, and he started devouring every word, and he was hungry for the life that he was reading about. And he finally asked one of the Bible study leaders, when do we get to do the stuff? What stuff? The stuff. What are you talking about? You know, the stuff here in the Bible, the stuff Jesus did, like healing the sick and raising the dead and healing the blind. I mean, stuff like that. Oh, we don't do that. We believe in it, we pray about it, but we don't do it. John couldn't believe what he was being told. He said, you don't understand. I gave up drugs for this. Now, your story may not be the same as John's. You may not have given up drugs, but when you said yes to Jesus, you told everyone and you told everything else that only Jesus could rule your life. When you said yes to him, you gave up being your own God. You gave up having anything else other than Jesus rule you. And when you did that, Jesus took you. And he has big plans for your life. He wants you to do the stuff. Jesus wants you to get out of the boat of being religious or being a part-time Christian. Jesus doesn't want you simply to be a nice person who comes to church. Jesus wants you to join him on the water, to join him in the adventure, and to be a part of inviting everyone around you to walk with Jesus. Now, if you want to know more about following Jesus or what it means for Jesus to rule your life, I hope you'll join me right after this service at the after service. There's a number on the screen, and we'll give it to you again at the end of the service. We'd love to talk with you more about a life of following Jesus and your questions about it. But following Jesus, my friend, is risky business. It looks different for every person listening, but God wants you to get out of the boat. He wants you to face your fears. He wants you to embrace your unique calling. That means experiencing the power of God in your life and accomplishing things you could never do on your own. Earlier today, I got to talk to Erica Batinger, one of our Grace members, who took her own leap of faith during this coronavirus pandemic. And I want you to hear from her. Erica, we are so glad you're here with us today. And we were in the middle of this coronavirus, and God said to you, take a step. Share a little bit of your story.
Sure. So it was a couple weeks in to the shutdown, and I was talking to my neighbor, social distancing, and she is a nurse anesthetist at Lehigh Valley, and she was starting to tell me about the things that they were worried about, the protective equipment, whether they were going to have enough, what they were going to do with their 6-month-old while she and her husband split shifts because he's a medical provider also. And I left the conversation feeling so afraid. Not so much afraid for myself because I was able to be safe at home, but afraid for her and what they were facing, and just not knowing what I could do to help. And I've learned that when I'm afraid, I really need to go to God's word, because that God did not give me a spirit of fear. And what kept running through my head was, love your neighbor, love your neighbor. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what to do, how I can show her and all the other people who are on the front lines how thankful I am that they're doing what they're doing. And a few days later, I was on Facebook scrolling like so many of us are. And
what else can we do these days, right?
And a friend who had lived in my neighborhood and then moved to New Jersey shared a post on Facebook basically saying, Lehigh Valley friends, there's this great grassroots movement happening in my community, and I would love to see it happen in the Lehigh Valley. And it was basically a woman who one night put a post out on social media and said, does anybody want to join me in sending me donations? I'll buy some meals from our local restaurant so we can support them, and we'll send meals to the front line to let them know, in the hospital, to let them know we're thinking about them and we appreciate what they're doing. And it took off overnight in their community. And so my friend Janine, in her post, said, I would love for somebody to step up and do this. And my first thought was, God, I feel you asking me to do this. This is my neighbor. This is the way I can help. And then the next thought I had was, I do not have the ability to do this. I don't have a social media presence. I'd like to have it all planned out. I like to know what I'm getting into. This feels like just jumping off the cliff into, where is this going to go? I don't know what this is going to mean for me to be a face. I like to be the one behind the scenes. I don't like to be the one who's on the front. And that's what I was going to be doing. And so I had a lot of conversations with God about it. And I just felt him saying, no, this is what I want you to do. So
I want you to take a step.
Absolutely. And so that step was, Janine's mom, who lives in the Lehigh Valley, was also interested in doing something. And so I thought, okay, at least I'll call her. I'll call her and I'll see what happens. And in that conversation, it was so, so clear to me that she had the skills that I didn't, and that she would be the partner I needed in doing something like this. And she had so much energy and enthusiasm and connections, and I just thought, okay, God, you're asking me to do this, and I'm going to take one step. And what's been most amazing about it is there was no way to plan what this was going to look like. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We didn't know the needs. We didn't know whether people were going to resonate with this idea and donate literally to people who just posted on social media, you don't even know me, I'm thinking about doing this, would you contribute? And within the first week, we had raised over $3,000, and we were delivering meals to the local hospitals, and we've since expanded to nursing homes, to first responders, to urgent care sites, basically as a way to say thank you to those on the front lines, but also thank you to the restaurants for the fact that they can't be providing the kind of meals that they want to be, but we can give them an avenue to do what they love to do.
So you said yes. God clearly led you, and some amazing things have happened. Now, today, how many meals, what's happening right now?
Sure. Well, we have delivered, as of Sunday, we delivered 1,600 meals. We've raised $17,000. It looks like we're on pace to be able to direct at least $20,000 back to the local restaurant community. And we're not sure how long this needs to go. We would like it to go as long as there's a need, as long as the community is shut down. But we also respect that there are a lot of other needs out there. And so we want to be relevant for while it makes sense for us to be, and then be able to move on.
And if people want to know more about Flag LV, we've got a link to to the website that you can go and get more information and find out ways that you might want to be involved with that. But one more question for you. So you said yes, and there were some moments where you slipped maybe, and where you. But what has this done for your faith?
Yeah. I know that God works the best when we are weak, and his glory can shine when it is clear that this is not coming from our strength. And I know personally, and I think certainly my family knows around me, that this is not my comfort zone. And I don't like asking people for money. I don't like putting myself out on social media. I don't like being the face of something. But it's been so clear that God's hand has been in it. And what has been even more exciting is to see not just the financial support that Flag has been able to provide, and it's a movement that's gone across the country. There are over 100 groups, and the
Wow.
numbers are just staggering in terms of what has been contributed back. But it's also given people something positive to focus on, and I know for me, that has been such a gift, because really, I have been able to devote a lot of my time over the quarantine to something that is so positive, and to see people doing good in our community, throughout our congregation, but also throughout the greater community. And what a gift that has been.
Now, I suspect for Erica, there's going to be another moment, who knows when, where God's going to say, hey, take this step. What are you taking away from this moment where you took the step that might speak to the Erica who's going to have to take another step?
Absolutely. If God calls you into it, he is going to provide. He's not going to provide the plan for you to look at and approve. He's going to provide each step. And if you can take that step and just watch him work in your life, it's taking your hands off the wheel of your life, but you get to move into the passenger seat, and you get to see his provision and his power and the glimpse of his plan. That is just such an exciting place to be.
Amen. Thank you. Erica took her own leap, but you will have your own. You were made for this. This is how God wired you and designed you. I love what Helmut Tillich said. He says, in the end, God gives us nothing we ever expected, but everything we've ever dreamed of. See, getting out of the boat, it means getting a life. Peter took this step, and he took a risk, and he got a life. See, Jesus took this guy who took the step and sunk, and Jesus named him Rock. And Jesus put him in charge of the church. You have to take risks. You have to get out of the boat and fail and fall and get wet over and over again and look like a total idiot like Peter did. And pick yourself up and keep going like Peter. You got to take risks. You got to grow. You got to trust. See, way too many people who follow Jesus stay in the boat, and they miss what Jesus has for them. And here's another thing about taking risks. Taking risks can change the world. This isn't the first time the disciples find themselves in a boat and in a storm. When you read the Bible, it's really a good idea to look for repetition. And if you read Matthew, you will see that Jesus and the disciples in the boat happens in Matthew 8, and it happens in what we read today in Matthew 14. I want you to hear the Matthew 8 story, what happens. Then Jesus got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then Jesus got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Same boat, same wind, same disciples, and same Jesus who shows up. But at the end of this storm story, the people end with a question. After Jesus calms the waters and the waves, they say, "What kind of man is this? The winds and the waves obey him." But not the next time. Once Peter and Jesus are back in the boat, after they've had their walk on the water, the disciples get it. They understand who Jesus is. It says they worshiped him. And that's a first. They say, "Truly, this is the Son of God." And that happens even before Peter makes his own confession of faith. Peter's step allows everyone around him to see who Jesus really, truly is. Their understanding went from, "What kind of man is this?" to "Truly, this is the Son of God." Studying this all week, I wondered what would have happened if Peter had never taken that step. And I also wondered what would have happened if all the other disciples had jumped into the ocean with Peter, into the sea with Peter. But we know they didn't. It was only Peter who had the guts to go. I'm sure when Peter got out of the boat, some of those other disciples simply rolled their eyes. I wonder if they said, "There he goes again. I sure hope he sinks." But it took Peter to take the step. And Peter, the rock, would lead the disciples to be all in together in their mission to go and make disciples. What we need as we move forward as a church, as a community, is we need to get out of the boat together. We need to cheer each other on. We need to cheer each other to take risks, to use our gifts, and to share our hope. See, we need each other so we can go big or go home. So we can put the pedal to the metal. So we can leave it all in the field. That's the only way you can live if you follow Jesus, if you're sold out for him. See, this is the risk that gets you to the life you long for, where you take all your chips and you shove them into the middle of the table and say, "I'm all in for my master. My money, my time, my gifts, my talents, my reputation, my relationships, my all. I want to walk on the water." I know you will have a chance perhaps many chances where you're invited to a disruptive, potentially wet step out on the water, where Jesus will invite you to use your trust muscles and to take a risk. And my prayer is that you won't settle. My prayer is that you won't stay in the boat, but you'll get out into the water. Because when you take that step, when you take that risk, you show people everywhere Jesus. People will know Jesus because of your risk. God will work through you. Before I close in prayer, I want to give us a few moments to think about our boat. Is there a step that God is calling you to take? Spend a few minutes thinking about that as we get ready to pray. Jesus, it's stormy out. People are losing jobs, and people are getting sick, and people are losing hope. The wind is blowing our routines and our comforts and our securities. But Jesus, we know it's true. You are with us. And Jesus, we know it's true that you have plans for us. Would you show us the step that you're asking us to take? Steps to put you in charge of our life, or steps to risk, steps to do something that you've put before us. God, by your Spirit, get us out of the boat. Get us onto the water. Use us so that many people here in the Lehigh Valley will say, truly, you are the Son of God. Do that in us. Amen.